tram engine was very excited. He was wearing a brand new bell that shone like gold. He was off to the seaside. His driver was explaining everything as they puffed along the line.
There's a seaside village near here, and every year they have a big parade with a special attraction for all the visitors. This year, Toby, you're the special attraction.
Thank you, sir, said Toby. But what does a special attraction do?
Oh, just smiles and blows whistles at everyone, replied his driver. We're almost there. Listen, you can hear the seagulls.
Soon they reached the little station by the village. But instead of a big welcome, there was just one man. He whispered to Toby's driver and turned sadly away.
Well, if that doesn't take the biscuit,
said Toby's driver.
They've run out of room in the parade and don't need a special attraction after all. We've got to go home, Toby. I'm sorry, old boy.
So am I, sighed Toby. Percy was shunting in the yard. He didn't expect to see Toby.
What are you doing back so soon?
Before Toby could reply, the fat controller arrived.
Leave these cars, please, Percy. There's an emergency at the harbor.
Come on, Percy, said his driver. This will be trouble with Bulstrode.
Who's Bulstrode?
Wondered Percy. He was still surprised about Toby, and now he had two puzzles to sort out. His driver explained, Bulstrode is a disagreeable barge. He never stops complaining. His driver was right about Bulstrode. Today the barge was more bad-tempered than ever.
Come on, come on. Why aren't you cars where you should be?
There's no engine and we can only go where we're put, shouted the trucks. You're in the wrong place, not us. When Percy arrived, Bulstrode was sulking and the trucks were crosser still.
Our stone is for Bulstrode. Please put us in a siding so that we can load him up and be rid of him.
But the trucks were being careless. As Percy was lining them up, they burst through some buffers. Help! Help! They wailed. But it was too late.
Oh!
Cried Bulstrode.
I'm sinking. Serves you right,
Giggled the trucks.
You were always barging in and moaning.
It took a very long time to clear the mess. Percy watched as Bulstrode was towed to the beach.
There you are,
Said the workman.
Now you can just stay here. Children can play in you all day, and at long last, you'll be useful.
When Percy got home, he and Toby exchanged all their news. Well, we've both had some seaside surprises today, laughed Toby. But driver says that I'm a special attraction anyway, and so are you. Every time we go on our own line.
What do you mean?
Asked Percy. Well, all we have to do is smile and blow whistles at everyone.
James had to wait at the station till Edward and his train came in. This made him cross.
Late again!
Edward laughed, and James fumed away. After James had finished his work, he went back to the yard and popped onto the turntable. He was still feeling very bad-tempered.
Edward is impossible.
He grumbled to the others.
He clanks about like a lot of old iron, and he is so slow, he makes us wait.
Thomas and Percy were indignant. Old iron? Slow?
Why, Edward could beat you in a race any day. Really,
Said James.
I should like to see him do it.
Next morning, James's driver was suddenly taken ill. He could hardly stand, so the fireman uncoupled James ready for shunting. James was impatient. Suddenly, the signalman shouted. There was James puffing away down the line.
All traffic halted.
He announced at last. Then he told the fireman what had happened.
2 boys were on James's footplate fiddling with the controls. Phew. They tumbled off and ran when James started.
The signalman answered the telephone.
Yes? He's here. Right. I'll tell him. The inspector's coming at once. He wants a shunter's pole and a coil of wire rope. What for?
Wondered the fireman.
Search me, but you'd better get them quickly.
The fireman was ready when Edward arrived. The inspector saw the pole and the rope.
Good man. Jump in.
We'll catch him, puffed Edward. James was laughing.
What a lark! What a lark!
He chuckled to himself. Suddenly, he was going faster and faster. He realized that he had no driver.
What shall I do? I can't stop. Help! Help!
We're coming, called Edward. Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last he caught up with James.
Steady, Edward.
Called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engine swayed and lurched. At last!
Got him!
He shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine's speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. So the old iron caught you after all, chuckled Edward.
I'm sorry.
Whispered James.
Thank you for saving me. You were splendid, Edward.
That's all right, replied Edward. The engines arrived at the station side by side. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting.
A fine piece of work,
He said.
James, you can rest and then take your train. I'm proud of you, Edward. You shall go to the works and have your worn parts mended.
Oh, thank you, sir, said Edward. It'll be lovely not to clank.
It was holiday time on the island of Sodor. All the engines were working hard and happily. Except for James.
Why should a splendid engine like me take messy coal cars instead of coaches? Percy or Oliver should do it. I'm too important.
Thomas was cross. James, why don't you think about something or someone else for a change? You'll be surprised at how much better you'll feel if you do.
Oh, please. Being important is the only thing for me to think about. Ha!
That plane's making a great deal of noise about something, said Percy to Oliver.
His name's Tiger Moth,
Replied Oliver.
and it's flying around telling everyone about the fair that's arriving today.
What are you two doing here?
Sir Topham Hatt wants us to pick up a very special load from the harbor.
And I think it's got something to do with the fair, added Percy. Then they puffed away. Meanwhile, James was collecting quarry trucks from the yard.
Dustier and dustier.
He grumbled. Then he saw his friend, Mrs. Kindly.
She looks miserable.
What's the matter? Asked James's driver.
My sister has rung to tell me she can't come to stay with me. I was so looking forward to her visit.
The Fat Controller soon heard the sad news.
We must cheer her up. Send Harold the helicopter to pick her up immediately.
A few minutes later, there was a surprise for Mrs. Kindly.
All present and correct,
Called Harold.
I'm here on a flying visit. Hurry aboard, Mrs. Kindly, and fly the sky with me. Compliments of Sir Topham Hatt. Oh, how lovely. Harold's made my paint dustier than ever.
Muttered James, but he was happy for Mrs. Kindly. Soon she was flying high in Harold.
I've never seen the island like this before. It's wonderful.
Meanwhile, Percy and Oliver had arrived at the docks. Cranky the Crane was unloading an old tramp steamer.
Hey down there, you two. I'm playing Lucky Dip in the Tramper's Hold, and all these are for you.
Wooden horses, Percy exclaimed, for the carousel ride. It's going to be a very exciting fair.
It is indeed.
Whistled James.
Sir Topham Hatt has ordered me to stop pulling coal cars and go to the station instead. Something to do with Mrs. Kindly. Goodbye.
Well, what do you think of that? Gasped Percy. Mrs. Kindly was waiting for James with the Fat Controller.
Now this is your very special treat. James will take you on a mystery ride, and I shall meet you at your destination.
James took Mrs. Kindly along her favourite coastal route to Tidmouth Bay. When he arrived there, it was dark. A big surprise awaited Mrs. Kindly.
Oh!
She cried.
You've brought me to the fairground! How lovely!
Best of all, the Fat Controller invited her to make the announcement.
I declare this fairground open! You were quite right, Thomas.
James whispered.
Making someone happy does cheer you up.
Then together they watched the fun of the fair. One summer's day, Thomas and Percy were idling in the station when Bertie the bus arrived.
Have you noticed something?
Said Bertie. What sort of something? Asked Thomas.
Sir Topham Hatt. seems different, replied Bertie.
I did see him staring at the clouds this morning, said Percy. I wonder why. The reason was simple. It was Lady Hat's birthday and Sir Topham had a new outfit.
It's perfect for my birthday party,
Said his wife.
You'll look splendid, Topham, dear. And I'll wear my finest hat just for you,
He replied.
Your birthday is a great occasion. It is, so don't be late. Don't worry, my dear. I shall be spick and span and right on time.
Later that day, the Fat Controller had changed into his new suit,
You look fine, sir.
said the station master.
You'd best be going. Indeed.
Agreed the Fat Controller.
The engines are busy. I'll take the car. Is it reliable?
Asked the station master.
Certainly.
Said the Fat Controller. But it wasn't. As he sped along, he suddenly saw a large hole in the road. He braked hard, but it was too late.
Bother. Now I've got a puncture. If I change my wheel, I am sure to dirty my suit, and that would never do.
Just then, he heard Caroline.
I have to attend my wife's birthday party, and I cannot be late. Please give me a lift. I'll try, sir.
Caroline didn't like going fast,
I'm hot. My engine will overheat.
and it did,
Told you so.
said Caroline sadly.
Bother. Bother.
Then he heard a loud whistle. It was George the steamroller. George was cross when he saw Caroline.
Call yourself a car? You're a disgrace to the road. Find yourself a scrapyard.
Caroline spluttered in fury. George's driver was more polite,
Can I be of assistance, sir? Only if you can get me to my wife's birthday party.
sighed the Fat Controller.
We can take you to Thomas.
Replied the driver,
He's just down the line. Much obliged.
and they rumbled away.
What about me?
Wailed Caroline.
I'll send for help.
Called the Fat Controller.
Stay there. That's all I can do.
George was enjoying rolling along the lane, but not the Fat Controller. Oil splashed everywhere. Worse was to follow.
Help!
Cried George.
Something snapped.
He veered out of control and the Fat Controller landed in a muddy ditch close to where Thomas was taking on water.
Bother. Bother.
Thomas had never seen the Fat Controller in such a mess. Can I help you, sir? Asked Thomas's driver.
Yes, please. Get me to the station as fast as you can.
I'm afraid our fireman's been taken ill,
Then I'll be your fireman.
sighed the Fat Controller. Thomas was excited. The Fat Controller had to work hard. Coal dust and smut flew everywhere. At last, they reached the station. The Fat Controller looked at the clock.
Just in time.
Hurriedly picked up a huge bunch of flowers. Good luck! The Controller's wife was waiting for him. As the clock struck 2, there stood Sir Topham Hatt, tired but triumphant. He gave his wife flowers.
Well, thank you, my dear. I knew this was my special birthday party, but I didn't know it was fancy dress.
Everyone laughed. And then the party began. Bill and Ben are the most mischievous engines working on the Fat Controller's railway. They are kept busy pushing and pulling trucks up and down the line that runs from the China Clay Works to the harbour yard. They like to have fun together and often play tricks on the workmen. But sometimes their teasing ways can get them into trouble. One morning, the Fat Controller came to see them.
Important goods have arrived in the big yard. Bill and Ben, I need you to help the other engines. Oh, yes, of course, sir,
replied the twins. They set off happily on their important mission. Boko was resting in the yard when suddenly he heard a pair of familiar whistles. Sighed Boko.
Here comes trouble. Sir Topham Hatt told us you were tired. He asked us to take all your cars for you. You two never stop, do you? But I'm wise to your pranks, and we do need help here.
The twins were soon busy pushing and pulling the heavy trucks into place. At last, the day's work was done. The twins now became excited. They were going to use the turntable for the first time. Bill went first.
This is fun,
he shrieked to Ben. He didn't want to move off at all. The foreman stopped the turntable. Please make way for the other engines, he ordered. Bill did so, but unfortunately the foreman had accidentally stopped the turntable in the wrong place. Bill was on the wrong track and there was Ben puffing directly toward him. The engines came to a grinding halt. They gazed grimly at each other.
I was here first,
said Bill.
But you're in my way,
protested Ben.
You'll have to back up again. I won't. You will. I won't.
The Fat Controller came to stop the noise.
If you don't behave, I shall not allow you here again.
The next day, Ben was still grumpy.
That Bill, imagine getting in my way on the turntable. He's a really silly engine. The way I heard it,
sighed Boko,
it sounded like you were both to blame. You must have heard it all wrong.
The twins grumbled about each other all day. Even kind Edward lost patience. All this grumbling spreads bad atmosphere in the yard.
You're quite right, and that's why I've come up with a plan.
Boko whispered his plan to Edward. Then his driver told the Fat Controller.
I'll start making arrangements right away.
The next morning, he called Bill and Ben into the yard.
Boko is taking a special train to the harbor. His regular heavy goods train is waiting on the siding. You can pull it together. But,
protested Bill and Ben, who were still not speaking to each other.
Good. I knew I could rely on you two. I'll take the train myself,
puffed Ben.
Go right ahead,
said Bill. Ben was coupled up to the train of trucks, but they were too heavy for him to move alone.
Go on,
teased Bill.
I can't,
said Ben. Then suddenly both twins laughed.
I don't think we'll take turns this time, Ben, said
Bill.
I think we'd better pull together.
Ben was delighted. It was good to be helping each other. Best of all, it was good to be friends again.
Every day, Sir Topham Hatt came to the station to catch his train.
Hello,
he always said to Thomas.
Don't let the silly freight cars tease you. Remember, you have an important job as a special helper in the train yard.
There were lots of freight cars, and Thomas worked very hard pushing and pulling them into place. There was also a small coach and two strange things his driver called cranes.
That's the breakdown train.
He told Thomas.
The cranes are for lifting heavy things like engines and coaches and freight cars.
One day, Thomas was in the yard. Suddenly, he heard an engine whistling. Help! Help! A freight train came rushing through much too fast. The engine was James, and he was frightened. His brake blocks were on fire.
They're pushing me! They're pushing me!
He panted. On lapped the freight cars, still whistling.
Help! Help!
Poor James disappeared. I'd like to teach those freight cars a lesson, said Thomas the tank engine. Soon came the alarm.
James is off the line! The breakdown train! Quickly!
Thomas was coupled on, and off they went. Thomas worked his hardest. Hurry, 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 he puffed. He wasn't pretending to be like Gordon. He really meant it. Bother those freight cars and their tricks. I hope poor James isn't hurt. James's driver and fireman were feeling him all over to see if he was hurt.
Never mind, James.
They said.
It was those silly freight cars and your old wooden brakes that caused the accident.
Thomas pushed the breakdown train alongside. Then he pulled away the unhurt freight cars.
Oh dear! Oh dear!
They groaned. Serves you right, puffed Thomas. He was hard at work, puffing backwards and forwards all afternoon. This'll teach you a lesson. This'll teach you a lesson, he told the freight cars. And they answered,
Yes, it will! Yes, it will!
They left the broken cars. Then with two cranes, they put James back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Thomas helped him back to the shed. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting anxiously for them.
Well, Thomas,
He said,
I've heard all about it, and I'm very pleased with you. You're a really useful engine. James shall have some proper brakes and a new coat of paint, and you shall have a branch line all to yourself.
"Oh, thank you, sir," said Thomas. Now Thomas is as happy as can be. He has a branch line and two coaches called Annie and Clarabelle. He puffs proudly backwards and forwards with them all day. He is never lonely. Edward and Henry stop quite often and tell him the news. Gordon is always in a hurry, but never forgets to say boop, boop, and Thomas always whistles peep, peep in return.